Hey guys, let's get started on lecture for today. We are in the book, and you should have your notes open. We're on page 45 in the online book. We are going to review. So remember, feudalism is the pyramid, where peasants provide service to the knights, provide services to the nobles, provide services to the kings, and in return, the king shares all of his land and everybody's happy. So the revival of trade happened during feudalism times because the merchants felt safe to travel again. Farming methods became more advanced, and so more food meant more people. So serfs started running away from the land and the towns that they lived in, and they became crafts people. So they each had specialized jobs, and this created the new middle class. They had few riches and few rights and few privileges, but they had a lot more freedom than they did living on the land of the knights. So the Crusades took place. European Christians were angry because the Muslims took over Jerusalem, and then the decline of feudalism happened because many of the serfs or the peasants left the manors to go work in town. So during this time, the bubonic plague, which is still around today, in some places, it killed about 1/4 of the population in Europe. And because feudal lords lost power and serfs, the kings gained a lot of power. So the Renaissance was a result of this. So let me scroll here in our book. Here's the Renaissance. The Renaissance is on page 46 at the bottom. It's a time of increased interest in art and learning. So Renaissance is a French term meaning rebirth. So it lasted from the 1300s to about 1600, spread from Italy throughout all of Europe. So there were several forces leading to the rebirth of learning. Feudalism and the plague brought a lot of suffering. So Europeans began like, what is the meaning of life? Why is this happening? So in their search for answers, some people turned to old sources. So they turned to the writings of the Greeks. So the first factor that led to this rebirth or this Renaissance was the Greeks praised human achievement. European scholars began humanism, the study of human worth, ideas, and potential. Also, the classic education stressed subjects such as history, philosophy, and literature. From classical art, European artists learned to make the art more realistic. If you look at your notes, I've included a lot of the artwork. Very realistic. Like, look at these hands here. Oh my goodness, I'm froggy, guys. These hands look super realistic. The facial features became more, what's the word I'm looking at? More realistic, and I can't think of the other word I'm trying to say. But their artwork during this time was just phenomenal. And I know that you guys have, hopefully, I hope you know, you guys have, you know what the Mona Lisa is. If you've seen the Mona Lisa, that painting was also done during Renaissance times. Another thing was Muslim scholars saved classical manuscripts about science. They also invented algebra during this time. And cartography or map making became more scientific. I showed you guys last week the pictures of the early maps and how kind of silly they looked because they did a lot of guessing and they did a lot of traveling based on their guesses. And so this is how Christopher Columbus came to be here, because he totally miscalculated the globe. So an invention that came to be during this Renaissance time was the printing press. I also talked about last week, Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press. So before this was invented, everybody wrote everything by hand. So I have included here a picture of a handwritten manuscript. So here's a before and after. Before, they wrote everything by hand, and they would also do these beautiful, intricate drawings to go with it. But the printing press allowed them to print so many books so much faster, was a lot easier. So people could print their ideas and stories, and so this spread very quickly. So also during this time, Renaissance ideas and other forces weakened the Catholic Church. Many of the leaders were corrupt because, if you'll recall, the church could arrest people. They could put people in jail. They also took care of people who were sick. So what was happening is the churches were taking people's money in exchange for God's forgiveness. So Martin Luther, who was a German monk, this is not Martin Luther King Jr. that you guys learned about back in the beginning of the year. This is Martin Luther the monk. So this is him right here. This is what he looks like. He was a German monk, and he criticized the church's problems. So during this time, it was called the Reformation, and it was a movement to correct the problems in the church. So the Reformation happened, and it split the church into two groups. So now you have the Catholics and you have the Protestants, both of which still exist today. So in time, the Protestants divided into many different churches. So when European colonists came to America, they carried their religious disagreements, and they had hoped for a religious freedom. Here is a close-up picture of, let me get here, of this photo that I've included in your notes. This is called School of Athens, and it's by Raphael. It shows many aspects of Renaissance art and culture, and you can see that everything is very realistic. There's shadowing. It's a really cool painting, actually. So let's talk about changes in trade. So the Renaissance period saw not only changes in learning and religion, but also in trade. As trade grew, Italian merchants needed to improve the way they did business. They began using more exact ways of keeping track of a business's income and its cost. So what they did, whatever they brought in money-wise, they subtracted the costs of what it took to make it or to deliver it from the income. So that was their profit. So increased trade led to the formation of banks to store silver and gold for their owners. So bankers realized that they could lend money to others before the owners needed it back. However, the bank charged a little tiny interest fee on these loans, and by collecting interest, the bankers became super wealthy, super rich, and super powerful. So profit became increasingly important in the Renaissance economy. Italian merchants made huge profits by trading Asian goods. The merchants in Europe countries envied the profits made by Italian merchants. That means they were jealous of their profits. So, as a result, Europeans began to want a share of the rich trades in Asian goods, which we are going to learn about in section 5. Early European explorers. So now we are on page 49 in your online book. Let me see how much time we have. Oh, we're good. So the main idea of this section, as Europeans searched for sea routes to Asia, Christopher Columbus reached the Americas. Columbus's journey permanently linked the Americas to the rest of the world. So, sailors seeking a route to Asia depended on the skill of their navigator. A navigator plans the course of a ship by using instruments to find its position. In your notes, I have included a picture of a navigating tool that they used back during that time. A lot of people who sail on ships still use this. Miss Cantwell has zero idea how it works. You could probably Google it or watch a YouTube video. It's a very intricate tool, and this is how they figured out where they were going. So in the 1400s, Portugal had a famous prince called Henry the Navigator. but Henry wasn't a navigator. He lived in Portugal, and he began a school of navigation. So Henry decided to organize and pay for sailing expeditions, and he was hoping to really find some African gold. He hoped to learn more about geography and spread Christianity. Excuse me. His ships traveled farther down the African coast than Europeans had ever gone, and because Henry sponsored the voyages, the English named him the Navigator. So, let's talk about this water route to Asia. Under Prince Henry, the Portuguese developed an improved ship called a caravel. I have included a picture of a caravel for you. The caravel had triangular sails as well as square sails. So these square sails carried the ship forward when the wind was at its back. The triangular sails allowed the caravel to sail into the wind. So there's two different kinds of sails on this ship. And they could go either way depending on what sails were up and whichever way the wind was going. So the caravel was better than other European ships of the time at sailing into the wind. So in January 1488, the Portuguese explorer Bartholomew Dias reached the southern tip of Africa. After sailing around it, he returned to Portugal at the urging of his crew. Portugal's king named the tip Cape of Good Hope because he hoped that they had found a route to Asia. 10 years later, Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama followed Dias's route around the Cape, continued north up Africa, but then he sailed into the Indian Ocean to India. So at last, this guy, Vasco da Gama, found an all-water route to Asia. So we're going to stop there. This is the beginning of European explorers. Most of you who had me last year did a explorer book that you did some pretty great drawings, and I still might have a few of them. So we're going to get into learning about all the explorers, who they were, what they did, and that is all of the lecture for today. Please copy your notes. Please make a copy in Google Docs. I don't care. Whatever you need to do to write these notes down so that you can have them during the test. If you need direction on how to do that, please ask me and I will walk you through it. Toodles.